What's going on, everybody? Jeremiah here from Babble in My Backyard, a pond and garden channel packed full of informative and how-to videos for you. Today's video, we're going to be talking about how to keep your greenhouse cool. I have this little gauge. This is pretty cool. It's in the description below. It has an app. This is a Wi-Fi connected, so anywhere I am, I can just check this out and see where my temperatures are in the greenhouse. With this device, I can tell it heat limits, so when it hits a certain temperature, it alerts me that it hits a temperature, or if it hits a temperature down lower, it'll also alert me that it's too cold. So we'll be using this device as our metrics. It's going to be the device that collected the metrics that'll show you how each thing that we do to help cool a greenhouse does improve that metric. The first one we're going to say is a must. You have to have some sort of a vent or fan system, or a combination of vent and fan system. I have installed this fan, and you can see that in a previous video up in the top corner now, or you can check that out at the end, and it's in the description as well. But I've added this fan and a vent. But the fan is up high on one side of the greenhouse, and the venting is down low on the opposite side of the greenhouse, and I happen to have a shaded side of my greenhouse. My chicken coop is on that side of the greenhouse, and I like to make sure the chickens don't overheat over there. Before we get to talking about where that fan was, let's talk about where it was before. Prior to the fan going in, for a solid week there, I was getting some pretty high temperatures with nice sunny days. You can see that I had a max of 103.6. It's pretty high. But really, let's look at the average, because those are spiking. Though they're a little bit wide, they're still spiking. And we've almost got 80 degrees there for an average. The week after putting that fan in, I definitely saw some cooling. There's those highest days there reaching up to 89. I was right about that same temperature outside. So basically, I never saw a spike in my temperature any different than outside. You can see though drastically that I have lowered my overall temperature average to 71.5 now. For the metric, folks, it's highs of 31.7 and an average of 22 Celsius. Because of the amount of sun that's able to still come in through all of the windows and the corrugated roofing, I had to do something more, because when that sun was hitting the greenhouse hard on those super hot days, it was still spiking above the temperatures outside. So I decided I was going to put shade cloth. So on the shade cloth that I got, which is in the description below, it has these grommets. I wanted the grommets so that I could just put some screws up on my upper framing and then just find a way to wrap it tight and hook into those screws. This is the 70%, which means that it lets some light through still. Obviously, I don't want to lose all the light. I just want to reduce the amount of sun that's getting in because it's too much. The temperatures are still too high, as you just saw. So we're going to put this on, and then we will see what the temperatures look like after that. If you've got a hoop style greenhouse, you may want to try something a little different for your shade cloth. Ideally, you have some space for air to move underneath your shade cloth. So with corrugated roofing like I have, these canals basically where air can move under the shade cloth. I am trying to grow lettuce in here still on the lettuce rafts and some other items that don't need that super high heat in here. I've got tomatoes and stuff outside, or all my peppers are outside. Everything like that's out there. I'm not planning on growing that in here, although I probably could have. I just didn't. Trying to keep it cool for these other things. I went with the shade cloth next. Let's talk about where those metrics are then. With the shade cloth, even though it seems to be pretty close to the same temperatures, that highs of 89.2, in this case I have made it so that the greenhouse is actually cooler by 5 or more degrees every single day. So none of these spikes are at the same temperature as it is outside. I'm now colder by 5 degrees Fahrenheit or more in the greenhouse. So just for the other folks in the world, that's highs of 31.8 Celsius and an average of 23.8 Celsius. If you did notice that some of those dates were jumping, there was a couple days there where the weather here was overcast and I didn't feel it was a fair comparison. There was a combination of sun and cloud, but still it was not a perfect comparison. I really wanted those nice sunny days through so that I could compare that way. And so that's what the data that you're actually looking at is those sunny days. A friend of ours got us this mister for our chickens when it gets hot. And so I thought I would do a test to see if this mister could help out keeping the greenhouse cool. I set it up outside of the greenhouse first and put it next to the vent out there because I thought if I can cool the air before it gets into the greenhouse, that might be helpful. So you can see that the mist is pulling in through this vent, and it's hard to tell in this shot here, but you can see the mist pulling into the greenhouse here, right up and over the pond edge towards the fan on the opposite side of the greenhouse. One of the downsides to this one is that there is a lot of water that's not making it in. It doesn't use much water, but there is a lot of water that's just dripping and not making it into the greenhouse. So let's look at the numbers then. Initially, it's definitely dropping. So we're hitting the 90s here and we're 6 degrees lower than that. So at the drop of this one here, you can see we were still at 90 degrees, and it's kind of interesting when you look at the humidity also. The humidity jacks up at the same time as the temperatures come down. Obviously, it makes sense when you're spraying mist into the air. So I let this run for a little while, and then we're going to see what happens after it's been running for an hour or so. So I come back later before the temperature starts to drop for the day, and I made it to 10 degrees cooler. That's pretty amazing that I got 10 degrees cooler than outside. So the shade cloth, the fan, the vent helped me drop below 5 degrees. So I was 5 degrees, staying pretty consistently 5 degrees cooler than outside, but the mister added another 5 degrees, so I'm down 10 degrees from outside. I'm gonna go ahead and do some more tests to see if I can get it even better. The next test that I ran, I put the mister directly onto some of the plants. I thought, well, if you can mist the plants, then keep the plants cool, then maybe that's gonna be helpful. Unfortunately, it kind of flatlined and we didn't get much less than the 5 degrees. This is a hotter day, so it is still 5 degrees-ish at this moment from the outside temperatures. So before the hottest part of the day, I went ahead and moved it back in line, but in the greenhouse. So now it's sitting up on the pond edge and just spraying straight up into the air. This, again, did result in a 10-degree drop. So it is 93, actually it's almost 95 degrees this day, and we're at 94-ish for the temperatures after I've been spraying this thing straight into the air. It still cooled the greenhouse appropriately, and I didn't lose all of that water. So in this case, all of the water, the excess water, is kind of just landing in my pond or hitting a bunch of wood in the greenhouse, so I guess that's why it's helping cool everything down. I've said this before, but one of the other big things for making sure that you kind of even your temperatures in a greenhouse is having water in the greenhouse. So all of this water that I have in here is going to help with keeping it cooler, because the water is pulling the energy or pulling that heat into the water. And then when it cools down, it will release that energy or the heat. In the wintertime, the water is really good for helping keep things warm. So when the sun does come in and it gets hot in here on a cold day, which it does, I can have it freezing outside, literally freezing outside. And then any sun that still is happening on those freezing days, I can reach 100 degrees in here. So it doesn't matter what the temperature is outside, it matters how much sun am I getting depending on how much heat I can get. So The beautiful thing about that is that the water will pull that in and then release it, so I don't have to heat the greenhouse to the same level as other people would have to run a heater in a greenhouse. I still have a heater as a backup for all those cloudy days, but it has a temperature gauge set on it as well, so that only when it drops to those scary levels of causing damage to the plants does the heater actually kick on. Hopefully this video helped you out. If it did, make sure you give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. We've always got great videos coming. And why not check out some of these other videos while you're waiting? They're pretty cool. We'll see you in one of those videos.